Live.
Oh, can you send me the link for the chat? I can never see the chat. If there's a chat. Is there a chat? You know.
Yeah, you should be able to see comments.
Live comments?
Yeah.
Nothing ever shows up.
Just under the comments.
Link?
It's just under the comments.
No, is it the YouTube link? Can you send me the YouTube link? Because I think I only got this one.
Oh, yeah, I didn't send you the YouTube link because I didn't think you needed it. But.
Yeah, can you shoot it over to me so I can see those comments? Because I can't see them on StreamYard.
Yeah, yes, you can.
No, I'm saying for some reason I can't. When I hit live comments, it doesn't show me anything.
Because there's nobody making any comments.
Has no one ever made a comment on this show?
I'm sure there has, but we rarely get anybody. I mean, we get like 2 people watching at a time.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Let's do this then. Welcome to the shop. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Dynasty Diagnostic podcast. My name is Eitan Mozia. I'm here with Sam Stompy Lane, as I am every single week. This is episode 49, and we are getting right into it. We are, as always, brought to you by the Dynasty Trade Calculator family of podcasts. And we will now jump into some of the news going on come week 5. Man, it has been an absolute roller coaster of emotions. Star players like Stephon Diggs, we assumed would be elite halves this year, have not panned out. Chris Godwin versus Mike Evans is a whole new world now. What are we to do with the fantasy landscape that has been presented to us, Stompy?
Adjust. I mean, some of these are really strange. So this past week, we thought that maybe the Vikings pass offense would get off the schneid, and it kind of did, I suppose. But that was Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen had a game. Stephon Diggs had 4 targets, caught 3 of them for 44 yards. So, and this is against a New York Giants defense that gives up a lot of yards and points through the air. So first and foremost, he had his best game against Chicago, which just doesn't make sense right now what his season looks like. It's like upside down. We're in the upside down, people. We're in stranger things.
It has to be, man. It has to be. That was the nuts matchup if there was one. I mean, I know this next matchup against Philadelphia is probably going to be the same sort of thing, but I mean, if we don't see consistent production from Stephon Diggs in this one, I just don't know if it's ever going to happen in a purple jersey. And that kind of leads me to believe that, I mean, it's unrealistic looking at it from a cap perspective, from a numbers perspective, considering they just re-signed Stephon Diggs. But I mean, can Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen coexist on an offense that's not necessarily going to be one with huge passing volume? I mean, at the end of the day, these are both superstar wide receivers. At least we think they are. If that's the case, then I just don't understand how you pay Stephon Diggs the 7th most to any wide receiver in the NFL to be a complimentary piece, if that, in Minnesota.
No, I agree. I mean, and I think we've seen, while he hasn't been vocal about it, we've definitely seen his unhappiness with the situation. He was fined $200,000 last week because he had unexcused absences, I believe, on Monday and Tuesday. So, I mean, every time that anything happens with Stephon Diggs, he misses a practice, there's any semblance of rumors, there's always those trade rumors out there. And I honestly would not be surprised to see him go at the deadline. If somebody is willing to pick up that contract, let's say a New England Patriots, which seems to be kind of the where all the rumors are going, but I don't, and you've been preaching this for a while now. How do you have the most money and percentage wise going towards your wide receivers in the NFL and not use those wide receivers? And I think there's an argument to be made, and I think a lot of people will not disagree with you that the Vikings wide receiver duo is the best in the league when they are getting the ball, and they're not getting the ball. And I don't know what Zimmer, what Ziggy Wolf, what that entire front office is doing with this offense.
Yeah, it's just really a tough scenario when, I mean, again, you have these pieces and you're just unwilling to use them. But that's the curious case of Stephon Diggs right now. Looks like Adam Thielen, if there's going to be a person to survive this all, it's going to be him. I mean, what's his value moving forward? I mean, last year, we saw a slower start out of Stephon Diggs, and then at the end of the season, it was Stephon Diggs putting up the big numbers. Adam Thielen was the exact reverse. He came out flying out of the gates last season. He's not flying, but he's merely surviving as it is right now. I mean, do we see a reversal of fortunes for the duo, or do we think that this is kind of just going to be a situation where Stephon Diggs is not just the 1A, at least this season, but really the number one receiver in Minnesota for the foreseeable future?
So I guess I was one saying to sell Thielen as of or after his second half last season and this offseason, because I think his peak value was after that 8-week stretch, but you could still get a decent amount for him this past season. Now, with the way this offense has shifted, I don't like the only reason that he's doing anything right now is he's catching touchdowns. And I guess I don't know what to do here. So, and here's the issue is that he's just putting, so he had 10 points the first game. He had 7.5 the second, 17 the third, 0.6 the fourth, and 25 in the fifth. And they're just not throwing the ball. I mean, he's got a decent amount of targets, but he's not getting a ton of targets. And I don't think that Zimmer is going to move away from this, because even last week, they did not throw the ball a lot. They didn't need to, but they didn't throw the ball a lot, and that was the best matchup they've had to date to throw the ball, except for maybe in Atlanta, but they ran the ball and basically ran the clock out the second half of that game. So right now, the only real piece that I want of this offense is Dalvin Cook, and maybe Alexander Mattison as kind of a secondary option at running back, just in case Dalvin Cook goes down, but he's got his standalone value. Other than that, everything has been devalued this season. And like, I have Diggs in multiple places and I can't do anything with him.
You can't sell him. You certainly can't sell him right now because, I mean, you're not necessarily going to get value that's anywhere close to what Stephon Diggs should be valued. I was actually going to take this one bit further. I mean, we had some things to say this offseason about Irv Smith, and then Cal Rudolph was re-signed, and now this is the new reality in Minnesota. The same thing that applies to both Stephon Diggs and to Adam Thielen in terms of just not necessarily having the targets to perform. I mean, that's double for Irv Smith. So now not only are you going to wait for Cal Rudolph to cede that role to Irv Smith, now even if he gets that role, even if he is the number one tight end on the team, he's not going to be targeted. And this is 2, 3, maybe even 4 years from now, because Cal Rudolph's contract, I believe, is 3 extra years. So, I mean, this is a lot of change really, really quickly coming out of Minnesota. This is what the tea leaves definitely said, but, I mean, we didn't think that it would go to this extent. But we are going to have to move on. We're going to go over to a division rival. Pittsburgh Steelers. That's not division rival at all. I was thinking of Baltimore Ravens. Purple teams. Pittsburgh Steelers. Third string QB Devin Hodges is likely to start. Mason Rudolph with the crunching hit between two guys. Earl Thomas caught him right under the chin. I mean, it was definitely a scary sight to see. I don't necessarily know why a cart wasn't used, especially when the NFL was saying that carts were available, even if the one that was brought out was broken. I mean, he walked off the field under his own power. He went out of the hospital that night, but this changes things in Pittsburgh. Once again, I mean, there was already a significant downgrade from Ben Roethlisberger to Mason Rudolph. Now it's Mason Rudolph to Devin Hodges. We don't necessarily know anything about Devin Hodges. And this Pittsburgh team it's not going well. It's really not going well. It's already 4 losses on the season. The Bengals are probably the only team in the division that is worse than the Pittsburgh Steelers. Juju Smith-Schuster is probably the big star remaining on that team, him and James Conner. This has got to significantly impact both of them as well. Do we think that Juju Smith-Schuster can still be a guy who can still finish in a wide receiver 1 territory at the end of the season? Or do we think that all these changes at quarterback and the offense just not performing as we thought it would is going to negatively impact where we value Juju Smith-Schuster both this season and into next offseason?
I don't know. This is just a really rough situation. So he was doing okay. I don't think anybody should have expected. I mean, yes, there was a lot of hype, but talk to guys like Peter Howard, and he will tell you that there's no such thing as vacant targets and the need for those to be replaced. That just isn't a thing. And he argued that all off season. So that's one thing that probably we need to take a look at moving forward, just like for guys that leave teams and guys that are stepping into different roles. But yeah, I mean, I was fine with where Juju was going through the first 4 weeks. He was on pace for, I believe, 122 targets, 75 receptions, 1,300 yards, and 5 touchdowns, which wouldn't have been what he got last year, but it would have been relatively close. And I think a lot of people would have been happy with it, and he still would have been a RB or a wide receiver 1 at that point. Now, everybody's kind of panicking after last week. He only had 3 catches for 15 yards, I believe. And that was against Cincinnati. I apologize. So last week he had 75 yards and a touch. So it's just, and that was before, most of that was before Mason Rudolph went out, and you hear Mason Rudolph, or before last week, Mason Rudolph said he's going to concentrate on getting the Juju the ball more. I think you need to be a little bit of afraid. This might be a buy low time though, because remember, this is a Dynasty podcast. We're talking a lot about reactionary things, and that's something that I think Dynasty players need to pay attention to, is people react. And when they react, there are chances to buy and sell. And I think this might be a buy window for Juju, because regardless of this season, the guy is still 22 years old. Maybe he's 23 now. Doesn't really matter at this point. And he has 2 top 24 wide receiver seasons already, going to be a 3rd in a row. He is a premier wide receiver in this league, and you need to have him on your team. And if people present an opportunity to buy Juju Smith-Schuster for relatively cheap right now, you need to go out and do it.
While I 100% agree with that, because yes, you do have to look at it from a long-term perspective, there are some worrying things when you look at Juju Smith-Schuster's profile, at least statistically so far this year. In terms of air yards, Juju Smith-Schuster is the 50th wide receiver. He's behind the likes of McCole Hardman, Christian Kirk, James Washington on his own team, Tyrell Williams, and Michael Gallup, who missed several games between them, Nelson Aguilar, Preston Williams, so on and so forth. These guys that you wouldn't necessarily think are the top performers in the NFL have, by and large, more air yards than Juju Smith-Schuster. We know it's really, really hard to replicate Yak from a game to game, from a year to year basis. George Kittle, despite his coming out party all over again this week, was kind of the poster child for that idea, considering the struggles for the first couple of weeks there. This is a concerning situation with Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, for everybody on that team, as that team gets more and more out of the playoff race, we don't necessarily know what play time is even going to be for these guys at the end of the season. I think that's something that you need to kind of take into account when considering playoff matchups. Now, that might be getting ahead of ourselves. It is only week 5. Things can definitely change. But as it currently stands, Juju Smith-Schuster, while he has the same racer as he did in 2017, his rookie season, which is something that we all were very, very fine with, that lack of deep targets and that lack of the big play potential in Pittsburgh is something that has me worried for Juju Smith-Schuster for this year. But just like Stephon Diggs, I really do think this is a situation where you want to buy both of these guys now while you can. Wait it out for a year if you have to, and you might see a new horizon come next season because these guys are immensely talented. All right, so we talked about Juju Smith-Schuster. We talked about Stephon Diggs. We're now going to move it on to a situation that is, I mean, we think they're an NFL team. I'm not sure if Alabama or Clemson would beat this team as currently constructed. He said he was going to come into work. He said he was going to come into work if the key worked on Monday. Turns out the key did not work on Monday. He was aptly fired. Jay Gruden was let out of the Washington Redskins building, and I think that's something that he saw coming. But what are we supposed to do now with this Washington team? The interim head coach came in and said that rushing was going to be what they were going to try to do more of. He thought that they got away from that in the last several games before Jay was let go. I don't think that makes any sense because Washington Redskins were behind by a boatload in the majority of these games. So in that situation, you do have to pass to try to even keep up. But if that's the philosophy going forward, Darius Geis is still on the shelf for now. Adrian Peterson still exists. Terry McLaurin was somebody that we had some hope for, but does that put some damper on him? And what does this mean for the future of Dwayne Haskins? Is he even really going to get a shot in Washington, or is this going to be a Josh Rosen situation where he was installed? He wasn't necessarily what the new coach would want or what the current coach wanted. He's not what Jay Gruden wanted, as all reports state. I mean, can this be a situation where, because of all the doubt, there's some value to be mined here, or is this a stay away type team?
I think right now it's a stay away type team. Geis comes off of the IR week 9, or can come back after week 9. I think it'd be kind of dumb to bring him back, but this team has not run all that well. Thank you, Dan Snyder. And it sounds like that Dwayne Haskins wasn't really Jay Gruden's guy. He was more of Dan Snyder's and whoever the GM is their guy. And it sounds like that Jay Gruden put Dwayne Haskins into that New York Giants game, or it feels like he did that to prove a point that Dwayne Haskins is not ready. And maybe he was feeling pressure from that front office, regardless of what happens. Dwayne Haskins did not look good, is not ready. Colt McCoy looked atrocious. Now, it was against New England Patriots, and it's hard to judge anything from that type of game because the Patriots are far and away the best defense in the league right now. But it's just, I think we were saying some stuff or some bad things about the passing offense, and McLaurin kind of rose above it. And I don't know if that will happen going forward. If Dwayne Haskins is the QB, you better temper expectations for McLaurin. For this season, I think there's a lot. I think I'm staying away. But if people want to be, again, down on guys like McLaurin who flashed early, guys like Darius Geis, who I still believe has a talent, he just needs to get healthy, I would be buying them, especially in Dynasty, because it's not going to be this bad for long. I think McLaurin is still a good talent. I think Geis is still a good talent. And whether it be towards the end of this season or into next season, things will start to go well for them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still in on Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin he's managed to be a diamond in the rough, so to speak, just because of what he's been able to do on that dumpster fire of a team. That said, he still has 491 air yards. That is in the top 20 at the wide receiver position. He has 3 TDs on the season. He is, I believe, in the top 25 of wide receivers currently in terms of PPR points. They're still at least targeting him down the field, which is kind of more than you can hope for anyone else on that team other than Paul Richardson that really has the speed to do it, and he's not the most consistent receiver himself. So I really do think that just because of a lack of talent around him, that you do have to hold on to Terry McLaurin, and you do have to hope that that usage and that target share and that 15.8 yard ADOT, just 0.9 underneath Mike Evans, is something that you want on your team. Terry McLaurin is still going to be a valued contributor this year, just for lack of other options. Now, when new offensive weapons are drafted to that team, I think you need to then reevaluate. Just kind of like Dante Pettis. I think that was one of those situations where people saw him flash last year, assumed that all would be the same, but didn't take into account all of the talent that was not on the team or that was not startable, that was injured currently, when he was having his breakout party. There's going to be a lot of changes in Washington, just like there were a lot of changes in San Francisco in that situation. I think that it would be wise for fantasy gamers to definitely reevaluate and not get stuck in thinking that this is something that's going to continue if there's talent added around him. That said, all signs do point to him being one of those guys that's going to be able to solidify his own target share, as Peter Howard would say, and command targets enough to at least provide value on your fantasy teams. And I think if you wait a couple of weeks and things don't necessarily go well with this coaching change, then you might see a little bit of a buy window there as people start to flee from Washington entirely. I still think Darius Geis is a buy. I don't know if, I mean, he's not necessarily somebody that you want on every team, but if you're a team that maybe is 2-3, is 1-4, not necessarily contending this season, he might be a guy that you want on your squad for 2020, just so you can pay the least amount that you can now for him and hopefully pair him with some of these backs coming up in this next class. But outside of those two guys, I really don't think that anybody on Washington is worth rostering. We haven't heard from Jordan Reed. Vernon Davis is kind of past his prime at this point. Jeremy Sprinkle is another guy that maybe comes to mind just a little bit. Chris Thompson isn't even a consistent PPR threat so much this year. It's kind of a wasteland out there in Washington, and I don't think it's going to get any better before it gets a lot worse out there. So this is a situation where I would hold on to Terry, try to buy Terry in a couple of weeks, maybe look at Geis a little bit, but outside of that, I'm avoiding everybody on this team just because I don't think that any of these guys are going to be in this position next season when they're replaced with new, fresh rookie and free agent talent. So let's now move on to one of the most surprising games.
Hold on. I need to push back on that Chris Thompson slander that you just threw out there.
Chris Thompson slander? I just said he's not the week-to-week performer. I mean, he's still a decent RB3.
I mean, he is the RB29 currently in points per game.
Yeah.
He has double digits in every game but last week where he had 8.8 in PPR.
Still a decent RB3, like I said.
You said week to week. You said inconsistent week to week. He is consistently double digits week to week, Aton. He's not going to be what he was in what was it, 2017 when he went off for like he was like a top 12 RB. He's not going to be that. If anybody expected that, you're an idiot and you should stop playing fantasy football. But he's fine. He's good for what he is, and he gets 5+ targets a game. He gets double digits again every game.
He's a decent RB3 for a contending team.
Now you're fine. God damn it.
All I was saying was he's not in the RB2 range. He's not somebody that you can really rely on starting week after week, even if he's hitting double digits, because it's not anything exciting. The upside isn't there for him. He is a guy that still has a decent floor. I think that kind of splits the difference between us there. Anyway, let's now talk about one of the most surprising games of this past week. We had one of the league's top offenses kind of neutered a little bit. I don't know if it was the team they were playing against. I don't know if it was the situation that they were in with the Patrick Mahomes injury, with their top 2 wide receivers out. But the Kansas City Chiefs lost. They dropped a game against the Colts at home, for what it's worth. The Colts came in with the intention to run the ball and squeeze the clock and make sure that their time of possession was such that the Kansas City Chiefs just didn't have time to do those famous drive after drive after drives that got them in the end zone. They just didn't have an opportunity at the ball. The Colts sucked all the air out of the ball, and I think that is kind of a decent game plan to beat these Kansas City Chiefs as much as you can. That said, I don't think it was all the Colts. I do think that Patrick Mahomes' injury, his ankle injury specifically, definitely played a role in what was going on this game, because that offensive line, without the added bonus of having a guy behind that line that can make some time for himself, isn't necessarily what we would want in Kansas City. If Patrick Mahomes can't run around, if he can't do those off-the-book plays, off-schedule plays that he's been famous for, a la Aaron Rodgers, a la Brett Favre, that he's often compared to, then I think that this is a quarterback that is kind of just like every other quarterback. Now, he's still going to get you the yards from time to time. I don't think you saw them in this game, again, because the Colts' plan of just not giving the Chiefs the ball at all this game worked. I don't think that's going to be the same in every single contest. But if you can hold Patrick Mahomes in the pocket, make sure that he can't buy that extra time for his wide receivers to get open, then this team is going to struggle if those wide receivers can't beat man coverage. I think Tyreek Hill is going to change a lot when he gets back, because Tyreek Hill is a guy that's going to beat man coverage all day because of his sheer speed. But as currently constructed, I don't think that the Kansas City Chiefs have the talent outside of Travis Kelce to really take on those man defense coverage schemes. So this is a situation to monitor. I think it's going to get better when Tyreek Hill comes back, but I'm worried about the immediate future of Patrick Mahomes as he continues to deal with this ankle injury.
I'm not overly. I mean, he had 321 yards. He's only had 1 touchdown over the last 2 games, which we can't really say that the ankle injury was the reason he didn't throw a touchdown against Detroit. The guy is going to throw the ball well. I think it does hinder him a bit. I mean, we won't see the 2 magical throws that he had in the first half of last week. And that's part of his deception, I suppose, is he's deceivingly quick. He's deceivingly fast. And he's hard to bring down. I think the Colts did a fantastic job of bringing pressure. I think the Detroit Lions did a good job of bringing pressure. And that's how you beat these guys most of the time. That's how you beat Manning. That's how you beat Brady. If you can bring that interior pressure, it's going to be tough for quarterbacks. I think it's just a mini slump for Patrick Mahomes. He still has well over 300 yards. He just hasn't had the touchdowns. And like you said, though, Tyreek Hill is back, or he should be back this week. And that just brings an entirely new dimension to this offense that they were missing. Hardman can do his thing. Demarcus Robinson can do his thing. Sammy can be good at times as well. And I mean, obviously Travis Kelce, but there's nothing in the league like Tyreek Hill. So having him back, I think, will help this offense tremendously. So I'm not overly worried. I think it does cap Mahomes a little bit. I think he'll take a few more sacks now, probably staying in the pocket. But I mean, he's Patrick Mahomes. He's the best quarterback in the league right now. And there's a reason for that. And it's because of his decision making in his arm. And that doesn't change because he can't get outside of the pocket as well.
Patrick Mahomes is one of those quarterbacks that throws to everybody but the water boy on his team. There's no real target that he focuses in on game over game other than Travis Kelce, really. Now, do we think with some of the shortcomings of these wide receivers of the past couple of contests that Tyreek Hill comes in and resumes his role as that other high volume guy out in Kansas City? Or do we think that this is a situation where, I mean, he's still used kind of as he was used last year? Yes, still playing a valued role in the short to intermediate game, but also used oftentimes as a clear out option.
I don't think it changes how he's used. I mean, I think he's going to be used like he was last season. I just think like there's nothing like the pair of Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. You have the premier move tight end in the league right now, Travis Kelce, for underneath. And then you have a guy that can basically do anything he wants on the field at this point. Despite his size, like the guy can do just about anything. We've seen him get jump balls. Like this guy's just a freak athlete. So I think this helps Kelce. It opens up the offense more because, like I said, Demarcus Robinson's good. McCole Hardman's good. Sammy Watkins is good, but they're not Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill just presents a whole new dimension to this offense. So whether it be as that distraction or what have you, it's going to help this offense as a whole.
Going back to Patrick Mahomes' lack of mobility, I think this is just kind of borne out statistically here. Now, understand that run and pass blocking are two completely different things, but at least seeing the numbers from one side or the other of that coin gives you an idea of what this offensive line is. So the offensive line out in Kansas City, and this actually has a lot to do with what we'll be talking about in the future with Damian Williams and LaShawn McCoy, actually has the 31st ranked offensive line by adjusted line yards. They're just not getting pushed. But when you look at their sack rate, their adjusted sack rate, because of Patrick Mahomes' mobility, their adjusted sack rate is 6th in the entire league. So what we're seeing here is a quarterback, again, that is not being propped up by his offensive line, but is making them look a lot better. If this is a situation where he is more statuesque than we're used to seeing Patrick Mahomes, I just worry about further injury. If anything, that's the concern that I have about Patrick Mahomes as he continues to go out game after game playing on that bum ankle. I think we saw a little bit of regression from Aaron Rodgers last season because he was playing the entire season with an injury. I just hope this is a situation where the Chiefs do everything they can to make it to the bye week. And I mean, consider holding Patrick Mahomes out those last couple of games before the playoffs if they have that locked up, just to make sure that he's ready to go for the playoffs. All right, so now let's move on to our next topic here. New York Jets. We already talked about cluster number 1 out in Washington. New York Jets are definitely cluster number 2, but Sam Darnold no longer has an enlarged spleen from mono. He's going to play this week. Demaryius Thomas is a brand new target on that team that I don't think Sam Darnold has even played with yet. Quincy Enunwa was still on the team. Robbie Anderson definitely is still there. Jamison Crowder there as well. Is this a situation that can be saved? Do we still have the same level of optimism as we did with Sam Darnold this offseason as we do now? Or is this kind of one of those ships that is already sunk and there's not much to be saved here? Is this just a situation where Adam Gase is playing Sam Darnold to get him experience rather than actually to go out there and try to win games and find themselves in playoff contention this season?
So first, I don't know anybody in their right mind that thought this team was going to get into the playoffs. That's that's optimism right there. And I'm an optimistic dude, I guess, when it comes to the Broncos only. But yeah, I mean, I think Darnold will have a good career. He's a second-year QB in a new system. Like, it's just one of those things where you shouldn't have been buying any hype whatsoever. I think it does open things up for Lev Bell. I think it gives more optimism for me for Robbie Anderson moving forward. I don't think you really were optimistic about Trevor Siemian or Luke Falk with any deep threat on this team. But this team still has a difficult schedule moving forward. They still have the Buffalo Bills once or twice now. I don't know if they played the Buffalo Bills yet. They have the Buffalo Bills twice. They have New England one more time. I don't know what the rest of their schedule looks like, but like their wide receiver schedule, bottom 5 in the league. So there should be more optimism, but let's pump the brakes a little bit. I think Robbie Anderson will do okay. Lev Bell will do better. You have Chris Herndon back. We'll see what he does in his second season. So, yes, there's some optimism. No, they will not make the playoffs. There's no hope. There shouldn't have been hope in the first place. But, yes, there should be some optimism in terms of fantasy.
They certainly spent enough money to at least have some hope in that front office, however diluted that was. But they did go out and try to solve a lot of problems this offseason. My question is this. Between Herndon, between Demaryius Thomas, Robbie Anderson, Jamison Crowder, who was the one guy that you're willing to kind of plant a flag on that you think is going to be very valuable moving forward? Do you think any of them are going to be, in that startable range at their position? Wide receivers, running backs, of course, top 24. For tight ends, do we think Chris Herndon can hit top 10 this season? Or is this a situation where, again, kind of like with Washington, you're just looking for anything undervalued here to just kind of get in on the ground floor not spend too much on, and hopefully get a solid, wide receiver level 3 contributor for your team for the stretch run?
Honestly, I don't think a lot has changed for Robbie Anderson. You and I think we're both relatively optimistic about him this season.
You more than I.
Well, okay, fine. But I think he had a top 24 season in front of him. I still think he can do that now that he has Sam Darnold back. And then Jamison Crowder had 17 targets in his first week they did play Buffalo that first week. But he had 17 targets that first week. And while I think that's a little fluky, I do think that Crowder's probably got a better outlook with Sam Darnold than he did with any of the backups. So this team is an enigma for me right now. I think I'm going to continue to plant my flag with Robbie Anderson just because of the fact that I liked him before, and with Sam Darnold out for 2 or 3 weeks, it didn't help Robbie Anderson, but I think moving forward, he will have a better outlook.
I think you just have to wait. You have to hope and you have to wait. And you kind of have to be that guy where after this Patriots game in a couple of weeks, then you start vacuuming up some of these Jets players. And the guy that I'd be going after is Chris Herndon, just because of the state of the tight end position. But just looking at the Jets' immediate future, it's not pretty for the next 3 games. It's the Dallas Cowboys, New England Patriots, and then the Jacksonville Jaguars. Before things start to lighten up a little bit for the Jets players. After that week, then goes Dolphins, Giants, Redskins, Raiders, Bengals, and Dolphins again. So I do think that there can be some value had here with Sam Darnold and with an easier stretch run. But for these next 3 weeks, it's going to be really tough to get any value from any Jets players not laying Le'Veon Bell. And the only reason that Le'Veon Bell is performing is just because of massive volume. All right, so we went from dumpster to dumpster. We don't necessarily know if this team is a dumpster right now, but it certainly looked that way on Monday Night Football. Things are crumbling in Cleveland. The Cleveland Browns, Super Bowl favorites for the offseason at least, now find themselves 2-3, having dropped their latest game to the San Francisco 49ers at home. Baker Mayfield doesn't look like the guy that was advertised during this offseason. That offensive line definitely has some issues. The play calling isn't helping Baker out either, because it's taking too long for those routes to develop when you consider that offensive line and that Baker isn't Kyler Murray. Is this a situation that can be saved? I mean, there's a lot of guys that are affected by this. Nick Chubb, we don't know what he'll look like when they add Kareem Hunt back into that offense. OBJ has not looked like the same player this year on a new team. Jarvis Landry is, still doing Jarvis Landry things, but he's never a guy that's going to excite you and to put up those big numbers. David Njoku's injured. We thought Demetrius Harris would get his opportunity, but it looks like Ricky Seals-Jones has got that role, and even in that role, he's not necessarily been able to perform. Nothing is going right out in Cleveland. What are we supposed to take from this? And is this one of those cases where you're trying to send some even quote-unquote offers for OBJ right now, thinking that this team can turn the ship around?
So I liked how you snuck in Kareem Hunt in there, even though you know that Nick Chubb looks like one of the best running backs in the league.
He does. He's not on one of the best offenses in the league, though.
And Kareem Hunt may not even play this year with his hernia.
Kareem Hunt will be healthy by the time he's able to be reinstated. What?
He won't be in football shape.
Okay. That's neither here nor there. Continue.
It is here. You have been on this dumb-ass train for too goddamn long. Nick Chubb is a premier running back in this league, and you're going to still sit here and go, well, Kareem Hunt's coming back. No.
I don't think that Nick Chubb isn't an elite running back. I think Nick Chubb is pretty much everything Saquon Barkley is, minus the absolutely insane receiving specialities that Saquon Barkley does have, but that doesn't have anything to do with it. I just think that Nick Chubb
of his balls.
I just think that Nick Chubb without I just think that any running back, it doesn't matter if it's Nick Chubb, doesn't matter if it's Dalvin Cook, doesn't matter if it's CMC, if there's somebody else in that backfield that's performing, that has a negative effect on both backs. That's my point with Nick Chubb.
Nah, you're wrong. So first and foremost, and taking victory laps this early, I think is dumb because we're not even a third of the way through the season. But I will say this. I said all offseason, let's not crown this dude before we've seen him play with this new team, with this new offense, correct? I was saying that ever since they got OBJ. I said, all right, I get it, but pump the brakes.
You absolutely did. I have to give that to you.
Yes, he has had some issues of his own with how he reads the field and how he deals with pressure. The offensive line absolutely has not helped. And I think you said that early on too, was this offensive line. I mean, that Kevin Zeitler trade may have been the biggest trade this offseason because of how much it impacted that offensive line. And you brought up adjusted sack rate earlier with Kansas City. Cleveland ranks 26th in adjusted sack rate right now. And they just lost, I don't know if he was all pro, but he was one of the best left tackles in the league. They traded him for Olivier Vernon. And that kind of went, I don't know if it went unnoticed, but it went under the radar because of that OBJ trade. And I think that's a major factor right now as well. So, yeah, you have three things going against him right now. First and foremost, why are you – and what's the offensive coordinator's name? Starts with an M.
Monken, Todd Monken.
Yeah, Todd Monken. You brought a guy in who has been one of the most successful play callers on the offensive side of the ball since college, since he was a college coach. But Freddie Kitchens continues to insist to call those plays, even though really haven't had that much – the Browns have not had that much success. And then you add in the fact that Baker's having his own growing pains, and that offensive line is not good, and you have a recipe for disaster. Now, Baker has definitely had his moments. He has 2 games of over 300 passing yards. He also has, I believe he leads the leaguers, tied for second in the league in interceptions. No, he leads the league with 8 interceptions. So he has a 4 touchdown to 8 interception ratio. And there is definitely some play calling, or there's definitely play calling in there, but there's a lot of bad mistakes that he's made this season. And he just has not looked good except for against the Ravens. So, yes, I mean, this is a young guy. He's going to have his struggles. Sophomore slumps happen constantly in this league. People get tape on these players, and you start to see these players struggle in their second years, especially at quarterback. Baker's has a bright future. You need to be buying him if people are down on him now. You need to be buying OBJ, still one of the best wide receivers in the game, because sooner or later, these guys are going to figure it out, and they're going to be a very good offense.
Yeah, it's just a situation where I hope that this band is able to stay together, and I don't know if that's going to be the case. David Njoku is going to be coming up for a contract extension relatively shortly. We already talked about Jarvis Landry. I don't think Jarvis Landry at $15 million thereabouts is going to be on the team next year as that wide receiver 2. OBJ signed long-term. Baker Mayfield still has some time till his contract extension. But the guys on defense, Denzel Ward is going to need a contract extension soon. Myles Garrett will as well. Olivier Vernon, obviously, is going to be on the team for the next couple of years. They've already spent a significant amount of money, and they're just going to have more and more expensive pieces kind of come up over these next couple of years. This is a team that was built to win now. Now, while I think this is still the beginning of their contention window, we've seen these things close very, very quickly. So I just hope that, like Stompy was saying, that Todd Monken is more involved in that play calling. I do think that quick plays, short passing that doesn't rely on too much time for wide receivers to get out of their breaks are really going to be beneficial to Baker Mayfield. But, I mean, as it stands, this isn't an offense that you can reliably expect anything from. There isn't a single player that you can go to this offense outside of Nick Chubb and really expect a kind of consistent week-to-week performance. Baker Mayfield has been, it's been okay, or it's been famine, not even feast in that situation. So I do think that towards the end of the season, as this team gets a little bit more experience behind it, a lot of these players are new, kind of fitting into a new scheme here. So I think we need to take that into consideration as well. But I think as long as the Cleveland Browns can find themselves to 4-4 at the halfway point in the season, that the playoffs are not out of the realm of possibility at that point. But it's definitely getting close. They're being saved by the division that they're playing in, also with the Cincinnati Bengals and with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Had they been in a more competitive division, this would be a more dire scenario for Cleveland.
I have a chub for Chubb.
Thank you. I knew we had to get that in here, of course. That is going to be it. We are now going to move into our 5-point inspection. That is the end of the news. So now we talked about victory laps and how we shouldn't be taking those too early. I agree, except for Cooper Kupp. I'm just going to keep saying that, just because I feel like so many people.
Listen, I think you deserve that one, because I don't think anybody in their right mind was like, yeah, he's going to be fine the first half of the season. This dude is just like, I don't like him and Emmanuel Sanders are like, screw all you guys with your health narratives. I'm doing what I need to do. And sure enough, we got this white boy out here just running all over the goddamn field and making everybody look stupid. So
wide receiver 3, Jared Goff isn't even having himself a good season. Brandon Cooks seems to be the odd man out when it comes to that trio of guys. I mean, I think Cooper Kupp can do this all year, but that's not the point. We're not here to grandstand about the calls that we got right. We're going to talk about the guys that we got wrong so far this season for whatever reason. Now, understand that there have been mitigating factors as well that have kind of played into all of these. But, I mean, just for transparency's sake, let's kind of revisit some of the guys that we talked about ad hominem this offseason that haven't panned out through 5 weeks as we expected that they would. So we're actually going to go back and forth with this. Stompy, you can start with yours, and then I'll give you one of mine. Who's one guy that he's stuck in the starting blocks and not able to open that gate and start to run the race this season for you?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people will associate me with my Albert Wilson hype this offseason. The only reason I wanted to bring this up was to talk about the bet with Liz Loza, just to scare some people. So we had Liz Loza on this offseason. I bet Liz Loza that Albert Wilson would be a wide receiver 20 or a top 24 wide receiver. And if not, I would wear a teal singlet and eat a child's birthday cake, a smash cake, if you will. So just keep that in your head and root for Albert Wilson the rest of the way. But really, like you said, mitigating factors, got calf strain, maybe something to do with the hip. I don't know. Just hasn't been healthy this season. And I'm hoping from here on, after this bye week, now that he's been able to practice with Josh Rosen, they have a good matchup this week. And I'm hoping that he gets off the schneid. But this Dolphins offense, and we also had our wrestler friend Eric Young on here, and we talked about how we felt like maybe the Dolphins offense was underrated. And now we might come to the conclusion that the Dolphins offense is super overrated, was overrated even in this offseason. So
I had some love for Kenyon Drake. I'll put it out there. I had some love for Kenyon Drake. His efficiency numbers last year were sights to behold. We all thought that with a little bit more opportunity that we would see more from him. He's been healthy all games. Not featured in the way that we would expect him to or want him to really at this point. Maybe not expect. Maybe that's the wrong word because we've seen it over a number of years now. But yeah, there is nothing. There's absolutely nothing from that offense that you want right now that's not named Preston Williams. And he's even a late round flyer that you're maybe just, thinking about stashing on the bench in the hopes that maybe he's a little bit something down the line. But you have to imagine that, the quarterback is going to be changed next year. One or both of those wide receiver positions are going to be changed next year with some of those picks that they have. This isn't an offense that's going to be easy to predict because there's going to be a lot of moving pieces coming into this next offseason. So while I would say that this is one of those situations where you have a team that doesn't get all the accolades, that doesn't get all the eyes on it. And so for that reason, you might be able to dig out some value for some of their pieces. For me, this is a wait-and-see approach. I wouldn't be spending much, if anything, on Preston Williams, and I don't think that anybody else in that offense is worth much at the moment, including Josh Rosen. I don't know what his future is if he gets Wally pipped again next season with a guy like Tua Tagovailoa coming in to take his job.
Mind you, Josh Rosen honestly has not been that bad if we really look at it. He's definitely been a game manager, but he is far and away the least of the Dolphins' worries. Again, not fantastic, not a good quarterback by any means, but I mean, he's got one touchdown, one interception. He's not the reason that they're losing. We'll just put it that way. There are a lot of reasons the Miami Dolphins are losing, and Josh Rosen probably is not one of them. So, yay for Dolphins. All right, so
Wilson.
It hurts. That hurts me to my core, and I'm just hoping beyond hope that they're like, God, we need to get this guy the ball. But I doubt it because the tank is so strong with this team that I don't think anything about this team is good. So,
oh yeah. But I mean, if you want to talk about a guy that hurts you in your plums a little bit, Eric Ebron for me this offseason. I don't even know if I should take the L on this one. I do think that with Andrew Luck, this would be a different story entirely. But even with Paris Campbell hurt, with T.Y. Hilton in and out of the lineup, Eric Ebron has put up one decent game in 5. Jack Doyle is still getting targeted in that offense. I mean, he's not doing anything surprising. He rarely does anything surprising, but at least it's more consistent. This is just one of those situations where right before the league year started, right before the new season started, the whole situation out here was changed. And for that reason, Eric Ebron is definitely by the wayside. He's in a contract year this year, so he might not be an Indianapolis Colt next season. That might be the best thing for him. I would look for Eric Ebron resurfacing with a decent quarterback, hopefully next season, and we'll see what happens in that situation. But yeah, this Colts team is just entirely different from what we would expect because of the Andrew Luck situation. I do think, and I pointed this out in a couple of articles that I wrote when this was announced, that Marlon Mack is just going to be continued to be used and used to his absolute fullest. We saw Nyheim Hines very much used in that game. That didn't take anything away from Marlon Mack. He is the back there. He's the number one back. He is kind of like Leonard Fournette, like Christian McCaffrey, just one of those guys that is insanely used. And as long as you can get that level of usage from your running back, you're going to get the production that you want. So Eric Ebron down, Marlon Mack up, T.Y. Hilton, I think, is kind of a push at this point. But yeah, that Colts situation really, really took a turn for the worst right before the season started.
So I think I have to give you a little bit of a pass on that because of the Andrew Luck, Jacoby Brissett stuff. T.Y. Hilton, by the way, is the wide receiver 9 in points per game. So wasn't hit all that hard. But just to push that point, I suppose, on Eric Ebron, Jack Doyle has over 100. He has 110 more snaps than Eric Ebron through 5 games this season. So that was the narrative that many of us Ebron haters and Doyle lovers were pushing. I can't say that. Yeah, that would have happened with Andrew Luck. So that one I can't give you too much flack about because of the untimely retirements of Andrew Luck.
All right. So who is the second guy that you wish you had not been so vocal about this past offseason?
I don't like that description. So I disagree with that description because there's a way that – so I do a weekly transparency thread that basically goes through every start-sit that I make, every start-sit decision that I make throughout when I write my articles. And it's more about process over results. And I think we had the right process here. I mean, for Albert Wilson, I had multiple reasons to think that Albert Wilson could have a breakout season. Maybe I was a little bit too high on him, but still, I had those reasons. You had those reasons for Kenyon Drake. You had those reasons for Eric Ebron. I think we had good process here. It's not like we're just sitting here being hot takey. We actually put in the time and efforts to present our arguments here. So I'm always going to maintain why or my vocality about most of these players, but we just need to recognize that sometimes we also ignore some of those red flags that we see out there. So my next one is Devonta Freeman. Now, I will say that he has definitely come back around through the last 3 weeks.
In the receiving game, though, not on the
yes. I completely understand. But he has, one game against Indianapolis, he had a good running game. But over the last 3 weeks, he's had double-digit points. But the Falcons' offense has just not been nearly as good as we thought they were going to be. I believe they have 13 games in a dome this season. Matt Ryan has not been nearly the quarterback we thought he was going to be this season. That offense as a whole, like I said, just not nearly as good as we thought they were going to be this season. Maybe that is something to do with Dirk Cutter. I don't know. But they've been in a lot of negative game scripts, and that takes the running game out of it. And I mean, that's one reason that Devonta Freeman just has not lived up to the hype that I had for him. He also has not been efficient whatsoever on the ground. Other than week 3, he has had a sub 3 yard per carry average this season in every game. And that's not great. But one of the reasons that I liked Devonta Freeman was his involvement in the passing game. And he has been involved in the passing game. He's had 4 more targets in every game this season. So I don't know if he will be near the runner that he was. Ito Smith has been okay, but like I said, that offense as a whole just has not been good. Their adjusted line yards, I believe they rank 28th in adjusted line yards. So the offensive line, though they tried to make the upgrades, has not been great. So, yeah, I mean, basically hold out hope that he continues to stay involved in that passing game, but that running game just does not look good for the Atlanta Falcons this season. And that defense is going to probably continue to put them in negative game scripts. So
the Atlanta Falcons are reliving their horrors from last season, but they actually have a healthy defense this time, so I don't know what the problem is.
Well, Keanu Neal's down for the season again.
Well, okay, that's one player. That's not him and Jones and every other guy they had starting at safety and linebacker like it was last season. But still, that's definitely a significant piece. But yeah, it's just we expected a lot from this Atlanta offense. They invested a lot into their offensive line. There's been some injuries. There's been some just poor performance along that offensive line. And I think we're seeing that borne out through the entire offense. When you look at all the teams in the NFL, skill position player for skill position player, I don't think there's a better team out there, at least offensively, than Atlanta. But none of that matters and none of that works if you can't get time to run and to throw the ball. And I think that's the situation that we're seeing play out in Atlanta right now with Devonta Freeman, even though Matt Ryan is still putting up numbers kind of in garbage time, trying to bring his team back from the brink over and over again. But the next guy that I was wrong on, I was wrong because I was on another guy in his offense. And that other guy in his offense is still doing just fine, still very valuable in himself, still probably everything that I expected him to be this year. But he's been completely usurped and totally overshadowed by DJ Chark. I didn't think much of DJ Chark this offseason. I saw the athleticism there. He definitely looked like a guy that was a crazy athlete. But, I mean, beyond that, he doesn't necessarily have anything that I kind of looked at. His college dominator was only 37th percentile. His breakout age was only 65th percentile in his class. But he's coming out and he is balling every single game with Gardner Minshew. And it's not just Gardner Minshew. On the play that actually got Nick Foles hurt, that got Nick Foles injured, that was a touchdown pass to DJ Chark. So he was, from the get-go, the number one receiver in this offense. This is a whole new world for DJ Chark. Right now, he has the fifth most fantasy points per game at 21.1. You can't find an attribute or a metric that doesn't look in his favor. His yards per route run are number 6th in the league. His yards per target are 13.1. His average air yards, 15.4, 13th overall in the league. I don't know what's going on with DJ Chark. I don't know how long it can last. I just know that right now, he is looking at like one of the best receivers in the league. If Gardner Minshew can continue to be the deep ball thrower that he has been so far this season, I think there's serious concerns about whether or not Nick Foles gets his starting job back. And I think we might be seeing Fantasy's new receiver in the top 10 in Dynasty at the end of the season in DJ Chark if he can keep up this pace. What do we think is going to happen here with Jacksonville? And does the lack of other options in that passing offense really just mean that DJ Chark is going to continue to be the force and the presence that he has been so far this year?
So I'll say this. Peter Howard, I mentioned him earlier, talked about how the third-year breakout, not necessarily a myth, but second-year breakout is more common. But it's second and third year breakout. But the point is that guys like Michael Gallup, guys like DJ Chark, guys like Cortland Sutton, we should be buying in the offseason after their rookie season, especially if they have down seasons. Because usually, and I say usually meaning like, I think he showed me a chart. It was like 29% of the breakouts happen in year 2. And so if those guys show some promise or they have draft capital like DJ Chark did, who was a round 2 or he was a second round pick last season, you should be buying those guys. And when we look at depth charts, was there anything really besides D.D. Westbrook that was blocking or that was you felt good about getting targets this season? Not really. And so you probably could have gotten Chark for a second or even a third this past offseason. And you would have been reaping the rewards of that. So I think that's a lesson that we need to learn here is that those second-year wide receivers that have the draft pedigree, that have the production in college, like the 3 that I mentioned, you should be buying. So I think DJ Chark will continue to be a good wide receiver. And
Sutton and Gallup had college production. DJ Chark, he was on LSU, so that tells you everything you need to know about.
Well, yeah, and that's fine. I mean, that's a good point. But like I said, he had that second year or that second round draft pedigree. And Peter will tell you that is the best indicator of success in the NFL is the draft pedigree. So yeah, I mean, he's continued to do it through in what we felt were bad matchups. He continues to garner targets. It's not like he's doing this on 3 or 4 targets a game. He's doing this on 7, 8, 9, 10 targets a game. I mean, he's had the fewest targets he had was 4 in week 1. He had 5 in week 3. He's had 9, 8, and 11 targets as well. So he's getting
averages 7.4 targets per game, number 23 in the entire league.
So, yeah, I mean, he's been efficient because of his ADOT, and I would have to look at his ADOT. Can you tell me his ADOT?
Yeah, it's high. It's 13th in the league, 15.4 yards per pass.
So there you go. I mean, and that's what he is. He's more of a deep threat. but he's doing it all over the place. So I believe this is real. And mind you, Gardner Minshew's a 6th round rookie QB, and he's doing this with a 6th round rookie QB. And to me, this can only continue to get better, really. Maybe the efficiency drops a little bit, but I think the volume continues to go up with these two. And I think it's a real thing here.
Jalen Ramsey wants out. The team is still pretty competitive. There's a chance this team could find itself sneaking into the playoffs this year. We're already in week 5, week 6 now. The trade deadline is week 8. It's not looking like the team is going to trade Jalen Ramsey, and Jalen Ramsey still has a year after this year left on his contract thanks to that 5th-year extension. I understand that he doesn't want to be part of the team, but is this a scenario where, because the team has improved around him, that fences can be mended between him and the coach? Do we think that we see Jalen Ramsey suit up for the Jacksonville Jaguars again, knowing that if he's not traded by week 8, the remainder of the season still awaits him, and then they still have his rights for next year?
The way that the league is going, I don't know. It seems like a lot of player right movement right now. Honestly, I could see him playing the rest of the season and then sitting out next season. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just going to be a tough situation with Jalen Ramsey. I just think that this Jacksonville Jaguars team is better than anticipated. I will say maybe one of the reasons we didn't see DJ Chark coming is because we did think that there'd be one more target in this offense. We thought that Josh Oliver would be at least somebody else for whoever quarterback was manning that spot for the team to target heavily in this offense. We thought he was going to be the number 2 target. We thought that Leonard Fournette would be the number 3. But he's been out all season. James O'Shaughnessy has come in. He's caught touchdowns, but he hasn't been a very voluminous target. So maybe a little bit of DJ Chark's opportunity came from that. And again, that's a late development that happened right before the season that really kind of impacted what was going on. So there's so many things that may seem one way, but may change at the last moment. And the best dynasty managers, the best fantasy managers are always those who keep abreast of the information and are able to disseminate what makes sense and what actually matters for what quicker than their peers. So let's now move on.
By the way, James O'Shaughnessy tore his ACL.
And is out for the year as well.
And Josh Oliver's coming back.
So hopefully we see some big things from Josh Oliver. He's one of those tight ends. He's a freak. He's like Foster Moreau. He's like Darren Waller. He's the same type of tight end. He's not quite an Evan Ingram type, but he's a guy that has some wheels to him. So Josh Oliver could definitely be interesting in that offense. He's just a rookie tight end, so I don't know how much of the field that he sees. But let's go with one more of your guys, then we'll do one more of mine, then we'll get into this week's Dynasty Diagnostic.
All right, so this one, this one's going to be hard to bite. It's Damian Williams. And even when LaShawn McCoy came on, I put up a brave facade and decided to continue to fight the good fight, and it did not work out for me. Though LaShawn McCoy had 0 carries this week to Damian Williams' 9 after Damian Williams came back from his knee injury. So there's hope for me yet. He also had 2 more targets than LaShawn McCoy. So I don't know what's going on there. But LaShawn McCoy has looked a lot better than I thought he would. In fact, he's looked better running the ball. Damian Williams has continued to get the goal line touches. He's gotten more carries. So I think they're limiting McCoy's touches for his effectiveness more than anything. But yeah, I mean, I was wrong here because McCoy looks better on a better offense than he did last season. And Damian Williams, while he has looked fine, he just has gotten his snap count reduced, his touches reduced because of the presence of McCoy. So I was very wrong there.
I just think it's hilarious how, when asked the question of Damian Williams or Darrell Williams or Darwin Thompson or LaShawn McCoy or Carlos Hyde, the answer was Carlos Hyde all along, just not with the offense that we envisioned him being with. Again,
what in the hell is going on? That is the worst thing ever. Oh, yeah. No, Hyde's effective. He's just as effective on the Houston Texans. Oh, okay. Well, fine. Whatever. Jerks.
Yeah, again, it's those last-minute changes that always seem to be those things that are most influential for fantasy gamers. So, again, information is key. Information is life in this game that we all love, that we all play. My last two were tied up into something we talked about before, Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham Jr. We talked about Baker. I'm going to focus this more on Odell. He's just not getting the volume that we saw as a Giant. Nobody's getting the volume because the Browns can't sustain drives. We saw OBJ try to be used every which way this last game, throwing passes, doing some end arounds, but he wasn't able to really get involved in the receiving game. And nobody really is in that offense for now. Do we think that, this is a new reality for OBJ and for the Cleveland Browns offense, or do we think that things get better with time here? Regardless, OBJ was probably seen as, 2 to 3 first-round picks this offseason, looking to acquire him. 26 years old with some injury issues. I think that 1.5 first-round picks is probably still in the range of what I'd be willing to spend on Odell Beckham Jr. because I do think that he can come good eventually. I really do think that I don't know if we can come next offseason really definitively, certainly put Odell Beckham Jr. in the top 10, top 12 of our dynasty wide receivers. Am I taking that a bit too far, or is that just the new reality that we live in now with this Browns offense as currently constructed?
I think that's a little bit of a reactionary take. I think there needs to be some concern right now with how that entire offense is functioning, yes. But I don't think you can take away from what he did in his first 4 seasons in the NFL.
It's kind of the same situation with Stephon Diggs. It's like, right, we know that these players are talented, but it does not matter if these teams are not going to use them as such. So what does that mean that we should do when it comes to how we as dynasty gamers value these guys?
Like I said, I think Baker has a bright future. I think Odell is still a top 5 asset as a wide receiver. They've had a bad start to this season. I think they will come along this season. Things will get better, and they will get better in the future. Now, how long is Odell there? I don't know.
For a long time, at least with his contract.
Yeah, so I just if and Eitan, that's not. I was going to say you're generally a rational person, but I've seen you tilt a lot on Sundays, so I'm gonna pump the brakes on that. But I will say this: like you don't say things over irrationally. So I would say if somebody like you is reacting like that, then it might be time. There might be a window right now with OBJ, and especially after that prime time performance from the Browns, to buy some of these Browns, buy Baker, buy Odell, because their value is definitely down after their preseason hype.
Some concerning things about OBJ this season: yards per route run, 2.26, number 32 in the NFL. His average target distance, basically his ADOT, 40th in the league, only 12 yards per target. Odell Beckham Jr. is not the same player that he was getting fed passes from Eli Manning. And that's hilarious that I say that. But I really do think that there's a question to be had of whether or not Odell Beckham Jr. would be better catching passes from Daniel Jones. Now, I'm not saying that Daniel Jones is a better quarterback than Baker Mayfield, but with the time that Daniel Jones has to throw, the Giants actually have about a top 10 offensive line at the moment with Kevin Zeitler. I do think that this could have been a different situation for Odell Beckham Jr. Now, again, the reason that I'm still going to buy him is because Jarvis Landry's paid too much, and he's going to be off the team. And if he's off the team, we already saw from Antonio Callaway, we haven't seen much from Rashad Higgins. There isn't too much else on that team that is really going to challenge Odell Beckham Jr. for targets outside of David Njoku when he comes back. But for right now, this might be a situation where you want to wait for most of the season. Let the shine kind of come off the Odell Beckham Jr. name, and then into next season try to buy low on a guy I think will be in a situation that at least is more suited for volume for Odell Beckham Jr.
So I'm going to throw one more short one in here. And this is probably reactionary for me because of the offseason battle that apparently was Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen. But Josh Allen is proving me wrong a bit. He still makes some poor decisions as a passer. He still has a lot of interceptions. He has a 5 touchdown to 7 interception ratio. His interception ratio or percentage is up, while his touchdown percentage has stayed even. But he's completing over 60% of his passes, which is very surprising to me after last season. He is currently the QB 12. A lot of that thanks to his running ability, which I think a lot of people saw in him last season. He has 3 touchdowns on the ground, 158 yards on the ground as well. And he has an extremely soft schedule coming up. For the rest of the season, he has the 5th best schedule for a quarterback. He has the bye this week, and then he has Miami, Philadelphia, and Washington in the consecutive 3 weeks. And then he has Miami again in week 11, Baltimore week 14, Pittsburgh week 15. So there are some difficulties in there. He has Denver, he has New England, he has New York, the New York Jets. But he has an extremely soft schedule most of the rest of the way. So if you can buy Josh Allen right now for this season, if you're like a contending team, I would be doing that. And he's throwing the ball better than he did last season. I will give him that. I was wrong on him. But yeah, so that's my advice for Josh Allen.
Yeah, I kind of have to second that. I mean, I didn't think that Josh Allen was useless. I thought that what we saw last season, at least with his legs, would eventually get him in the top 15 QBs or so. Finishing in the top 12 again would be a surprise to me, but I mean, it's definitely something that he can do as long as he continues to get those rushing scores on the ground. This is kind of what Dak Prescott has made a career of to date. You don't necessarily have to get miles and miles of yards on the ground as long as you can make those a few short yardage attempts per game count and get in the end zone, then you're going to be a valued quarterback. Josh Allen also threw 2 touchdowns in his last game. This is just a guy who kind of reminds me a lot of what Cam Newton was early in his career. He's never going to be the best passer. He's probably never going to be in the 68, 70% completion percentage. But if you can put some talent around him, and I think the Bills are going to continue to put talent around Josh Allen, I think that he can be a very, very good quarterback in this league. I'm not as concerned with him not being a starter as I was this offseason a couple years from now. I kind of put him in the same boat as Mitch Trubisky in that I didn't know he would be a starter after his rookie contract was up, and I think that those questions are beginning to be answered right now. Josh Allen is a guy that can ball, is a guy that can play, and is is somebody, even in one quarterback leagues, that I think is startable. In two quarterback leagues, he's an asset.
That's a shout out to our friends Michelle Majuk and her sister Kate Majuk.
Is it Magic?
I believe so. Majuk.
All Blast Podcast.
And that was a joke. They're not sisters, they're wives, but
anyway. All right, guys. So we are going to get into this week's Dynasty Diagnostic. Our episode 49 roster was submitted by some guy that Sam did not want to shout out on the show.
Sorry. Yeah. No, it's my friend Justin Gasper. He's actually a real life friend. So that's weird for me.
There we go.
So we're going to tear it apart. It's all my friend Justin Gasper. You don't really need to follow him on Twitter. Who cares?
Go ahead and say what's up to him if you can find him on Twitter. If you want to be part of next week's show, all you have to do is follow the podcast at Dino Diagnostic, smash that subscribe button, and leave us a review at the link in the description on iTunes. You can also do that on Podbean. If you want to get to the front of the line, go ahead, visit FF Pod Shirts, say what's up to Dynasty Outhouse, get a shirt, go ahead and see if you can be on our Patreon. Try to get involved in DDCL. Let us know, and we will get your team on the show.
Man, I don't even need to plug these. You already plugged them for me. Go to storeenvy.com/stores, search FF Pod Shirts. That is our friend Dynasty Outhouse's store, obviously, for fantasy football pods. So he has our shirts on there. We have 2 shirts and a sticker on there. He has shirts for Trade Addicts Pod, Superflex Super Show, Top Shelf. And remember that 10% of purchases go to Fantasy Care, so it's for a good, cause. I just forgot a word. That was awesome.
A word.
Hey, you guys you're hearing us make the sausage tonight, folks. And then like Eitan said, we have a Patreon. You can go to our Twitter at Dino Diagnostic and click on our pinned tweet, or go to patreon.com/Dino Diagnostic. There are several tiers. Any donation is greatly appreciated. Eitan and I put a lot of time and effort into this every week. I think we give good advice. If we don't, maybe tell us that. Give us some feedback.
I mean, hopefully all the listeners, they have many shares of
Lockett, Boyd, Cup.
I wasn't even going to start with them. I was going to say Lamar Jackson. But yeah, there's some good bits out there as well.
So yeah, I mean, and with that, you get a private patron chat. I know DFF Shane is in there. Dynasty Outhouse is in there. A few of our listeners are in there, so you can get advice there. You can get a T-shirt, a private diagnostic, and there's a lot more that you can get in those tiers. So yeah, help us out, donate on Patreon, and we would be really appreciative.
All right, guys, let's get into this team. It is a 12-team, 1 quarterback, 1 point per reception, 6 points passing TDs, 25-man roster. Start 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 flex, and 4 IDPs. At quarterback, in a 1 quarterback league, we have Aaron Rodgers, Derek Carr, and Dwayne Haskins. I mean, this is a 1 quarterback league, so for those purposes, I think it's fine. But looking towards the future of this team, I really do think that an addition is needed here. I don't know what Haskins is going to be in the league. I don't know if he's going to get an opportunity. I really worry about the potential Josh Rosen happening to him just because of the record that the Washington Redskins are going to finish with at the end of the season. This might be a situation where he doesn't really get an opportunity to be a long-term starting quarterback in that situation. And moving around young isn't necessarily a good thing. Derek Carr, the Raiders are winning despite Derek Carr so far this year. He still has not been a voluminous quarterback. He hasn't been a quarterback that's willing to throw it deep. This is kind of everything that we thought about Carr so far this season. Aaron Rodgers, I still think he's a very, very good quarterback. I think the Green Bay Packers are a much better team than they have been, and that's requiring less and less of Aaron Rodgers than we've seen in years past. Previously, offensively, the Green Bay Packers were lost without Aaron. In this last game, it was their running attack that really got them that win, and that defense that is out in Green Bay this year is just causing less shootouts that Aaron Rodgers has to go and try to win. So I don't think that this is through any fault of his own, but Aaron Rodgers isn't the same fantasy quarterback as he's been in years past, and I don't necessarily think that that is something changing anytime soon. So with Rodgers, with Carr, with Haskins here, again, in a one quarterback league, I'm fine with it just because you don't need to spend that many resources here. But if this was a super flex, I'd probably be looking to add somebody relatively young on this roster. Maybe just kind of get a couple shots out in the dark, Ryan Finley, Nick Mullins, something like that, just to kind of maybe have that other starter in the event that somebody gets sat down this season.
Aaron Rodgers is now a game manager. He has one game over 20 fantasy points this season, and that was a 33-point performance, I believe, in week 4. So you are definitely not getting what you need, or not need, but want out of Aaron Rodgers. In fact, he has 3 15-point performances, and they're running the ball a lot more, like Eitan said. They're middle of the pack. Throwing the ball 60%, running at 40%. I believe last year they were near the top of the league, if not the top. No, they were the top of the league at 68% and 32%. So, yeah, I mean, Aaron Rodgers at this point in his career with the team and the coaching staff that he has, probably not even a top 5, maybe not top 10 option at this point.
Does this give you any concerns about Davante Adams moving forward? Do you think that he's fine despite the lowered volume out in Green Bay this year? He's had 2 games with over double-digit points, and he has 2 games under double-digit points so far this year. In the 4 that he was able to start, he missed this last one due to injury. Do we think that's Adams might be kind of suffering from the same thing that Rodgers is, and that he's just not needed as much to be a focal point of this team when this team as a whole is a little bit better?
I don't know. I mean, he had the one game against the Broncos where he had less than 8 targets. He only had 4 targets. Broncos' pass defense has actually been very good this season. Chris Harris has been very good. He had 15 targets in week 4, 8 in week 1, 9 in week 2. So I'm not overly concerned there. He's really the only pass catcher that I trust in that offense. I guess deeper pass catcher. I mean, Aaron Jones looks good. He's caught 19 of 23, but Marquez Valdes-Scantling's catch percentage is only 53% right now. I don't really trust MVS. You don't trust Jimmy Graham. Don't trust Geronimo Allison. And I think basically Davante Adams is Aaron Rodgers' binky. He's going to look to him more times than not throughout the season. So I'm not overly worried. His ceiling might be capped a little bit more because they're not throwing, but I still think he's a top 5 option at the position.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I don't necessarily know if I agree with top 5, but I don't think you take him too far out of that range. I do think he's still a top 8 wide receiver pretty easily. But I think that a lot of his value came from getting touchdowns every game like he did over the past couple of seasons. I don't think that's something that we're going to see this season with this team that, again, doesn't find itself in shootout games, doesn't find itself in comeback scenarios as often as they did before. Looking at running backs, let's move on to Joe Mixon, David Johnson, Latavius Murray, Kareem Hunt, Justice Hill, Adrian Peterson, and Devine Ozigbo. Joe Mixon, behind a non-existent offensive line, is doing the same thing this year that he did in his rookie year, which is just be maddeningly inconsistent with all the talent in the world. David Johnson is getting by solely on passing volume out in Arizona, as that offensive line is not able to block at all. Latavius Murray isn't a thing. Kareem Hunt, we don't necessarily know when he's going to come back. Justice Hill is not involved in that Baltimore offense at all. Gus Edwards is getting more looks. Peterson, maybe we'll see an increase in volume just because of what this interim head coach is going to try to do for these next couple of games. And Devine Ozigbo is now off the Saints. He is on the Jacksonville Jaguars, but he's behind Raquel Armstead in the rotation. This running back room looks scary for me because what you would even hope would be good for you isn't necessarily getting it done for you. You would think that Joe Mixon and David Johnson would at least be top tier options at the position. David Johnson is still a top 10 option, top 12 option. Joe Mixon has kind of fallen out of that completely due to the injuries that the Bengals have suffered at the offensive line. But beyond those two, there's no one else here. Latavius Murray is not giving you anything. And we don't know what Hunt, Hill, Peterson, or Exigbo will be moving forward. This is a running back group that needs two additions to me. You need two strong additions to this group to be even relatively comfortable. And I really do think that you probably should be looking at guys that are maybe a little bit undervalued now. Maybe Miles Sanders would be a good guy to target here. I do think that this is not going to get you where you want to go when it comes just in terms of the basic RB depth that you have available to you on this roster.
So I want to go back to QB real quick because I had forgotten to say something. We had talked about Josh Allen, and because it is one QB, QBs really aren't going to be that difficult to trade for, except for maybe Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson at this point, but I don't expect Josh Allen to be that difficult to trade for. If you could somehow flip Rodgers for Josh Allen plus a pick, I would be doing that. So that's just a thought there to get better at the QB position. In terms of running back, I agree. I mean, Mixon has gotten better these last 3 games. He got hurt. He hurt his ankle in week 1, so that definitely hindered him in week 1. In week 2, he played San Francisco, which is turning out to be one of the top defenses in the league. So they fell behind early and had to start throwing the ball there. But again, top defenses in the league, they have a great pass defense as well. But then they played Buffalo. He looked good against Buffalo. They played Pittsburgh, who has a better run defense than they have a pass defense. He looked good there. Last week against Arizona at 93 yards on 19 carries, it was far and away the best game of this season. He's only scored 1 touchdown. I would expect that to change a little bit. So you're going to regress to the mean, meaning he's probably going to get more touchdowns. I think he will have a better season from here on, but there is concern about his offensive line. There was concern about his offensive line last season as well. I think he will continue to be fine. He will continue to get 4+ yards per carry. He will continue to be involved in the passing game, get probably 50 targets by the end of the season. So I honestly think he will be an RB1 the rest of the season because of the touchdowns and because of the fact that he is starting to look like his old self. So I'm fine there. Another valid concern with David Johnson. I mean, it's a bad offensive line. They had a bad offensive line last season. And yes, while a lot of his value comes from his pass catching, and that's how it's always been throughout his career, he has never been the best runner by any means in his career. But with a more creative offense, and with an offense that gets him targets, that's where his value lies. So I am fine there as well. But after that, I think, and that's where you have your concern is, yes, you don't have any top end talent here, but I think you have 2 RB1s moving forward just because of their volume and their touches in their respective offenses.
I would not mind having the combination of Joe Mixon and David Johnson as my 1-2 punch at running back, assuming this team was built differently. As currently constructed, though, I do think you're going to need a year or 2 for contention just to gather all the pieces that you'll need to be where you're going to be. And David Johnson might not have 2 years left in that role. He tweaked his back Chase Edmonds came in, was actually a better runner on the ground than David Johnson had been. Now, I don't think that is going to be the case in the end-all be-all when it comes to the running back rotation in Arizona. I think that will slowly and continuously creep into being a thing. I just don't think that David Johnson is going to get the volume and going to get the productivity on the ground for the next year or two to really not consider moving him at this point. If you have a contender in your league, David Johnson is a piece that I would be looking to move for other pieces on this team.
I guess I don't necessarily agree here. He does need to make a move. But looking at his wide receivers, I think he can make a move to get better at running back and be a contender this year. If you can get a third and fourth running back with one of the top two wide receivers we'll talk about next, then I think you're in contention for a title. And like I said, if you can make a small move at QB and get a better QB, I think you'll be fine this year. And if you want to push it, and he won last year, so he's going for back-to-back. If he can push it and get back-to-back, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, I do see it from that perspective. There is a little bit more depth on this wide receiver core than I originally looked at, but I mean, still for me, this is kind of one of those situations where you just don't want to be left holding the bag. I do think that there's still value in that. I just think that right now, name value alone, you could probably get a back plus for David Johnson back, and that's probably something that I'm considering. If somebody were to, even now with Melvin Gordon coming back, offer me Austin Eckler plus, I might consider moving David Johnson just because I don't know if he's going to be a long-term asset on this team. But for right now, for this year, definitely you should still be okay there, provided that you get that third running back just for depth purposes. At wide receiver, you actually look a lot better. Even though some guys are underperforming, you're having some guys overperform to off-balance that. You have DeAndre Hopkins, who has had a season to not forget, but not the season that we've expected so far. Michael Thomas still doing Michael Thomas things despite not having Drew Brees. I think this answers all questions of whether or not he was still going to maintain his value without Drew Brees. We've seen everything that we need to see from Teddy Bridgewater and from Michael Thomas to know that that is not going to be something that we even have to talk about this offseason. DJ Chark, we talked about earlier, he is having his coming out party right now. His overproduction is definitely making up for Nuke's underproduction. Allen Robinson is having the comeback story of the ages. All it took is an actual quarterback throwing him the football. Dante Pettis, Albert Wilson, I think we can leave off the end of this, but Nuke, Thomas, Chark, McLaurin, and A-Rob, I think that's a solid wide receiver core, and I think for that reason, it's just the one running back that you really need on this team to be a contender.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it really depends on where you want to go with this. I don't know if we can say we've seen enough from Teddy Bridgewater and Michael Thomas over the past 3 weeks to say that Michael Thomas will be fine without Drew Brees moving forward and will be fine the rest of the season, but he has had 7, 9, and 13 targets with Teddy Bridgewater, and he had 13 in week 2 after Drew Brees went down, I believe, in the first quarter, if not the second quarter. So a majority of Teddy Bridgewater. So I think you can feel relatively comfortable at this point that Michael Thomas will continue to garner volume and will continue to be productive. He is the wide receiver 2 right now. And that's with Teddy Bridgewater, like we said. And Teddy Bridgewater has not been overly fantastic or productive, but he has been targeting Alvin Kamara and he's been targeting Michael Thomas, which really, when you look at it, really the only two pass catchers that you're going to trust on that team. So I think Michael Thomas will be fine. For that reason, I think I'm selling him because DeAndre Hopkins' value is a little bit depressed at this point, I think. Now, smart smart dynasty players will be buying him. And in fact, I just bought him in a league. But most dynasty players right now it will have his value depressed. And while I think he will bounce back and he will be fine, you should not be selling him right now. And Michael Thomas has the not only the name recognition, but the production and the value right now that you could sell him for a top end running back plus a complimentary wide receiver. Now, what does that look like? I don't necessarily know. I mean, maybe a James Conner and something else. And if you get James Conner and something else, especially now that Jalen Samuels is probably going to be out at least a month, and you could get, let's say, James Conner, T.Y. Hilton, James Conner, there's no way that somebody would give you Juju right now. I almost said Juju Smith-Schuster and James Conner. James Conner and Kenny Golladay for Michael Thomas. You could probably pull that off, and I think you'd be good.
Yeah, I don't know. I would not be selling Michael Thomas. I do think Michael Thomas has every opportunity to be what Nuke has been over these last few years, all over again, just because of the concentrated nature of that Saints offense. Jared Cook showed some signs of life because of the touchdown in this latest game, but outside of Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas on the Saints, I mean, there's nothing to be seen from Keith Kirkwood. Ted Ginn every once in a while will be kind of there for you. Traquan Smith, I think he's had one touchdown. He hasn't had very many targets this year. It's a two-man show, and as long as it's a two-man show, it's very easy to predict who's going to get the football, and those are the situations that you want to heavily invest in. Will Fuller's big game came when Kenny Stills was out, when that was the concentrated offense that we foresaw in this offseason. As soon as these offenses are pared down to 1-2 guys, Tyler Boyd is another example, then you start to really be able to see what these guys can do with volume because they're forced into getting volume. I think this is one of those situations where me and Peter don't agree so much. I do think that the team has to run as normal, has to at least attempt to act in a way that kind of aligns with its philosophy. And if that means passing the football, then the guys that are available to get the football are going to find their target shares increasing just because of nobody else to pass the ball to. And I think that in fantasy leagues and dynasty leagues specifically, if you can manage to find the guys who are going to garner those massive spikes in volume when they find themselves alone in an offense, I think those can be some of the most valuable guys that you can have in Dynasty. All right, so Nuke, Michael Thomas, Shark, McLaurin, A-Rob, I think that is all well and good. We haven't even talked too much about Allen Robinson, but you guys all know what he did with his 2-touchdown day. Tight end, we have Evan Ingram and Mark Andrews. There's nothing to say about this tight end group. Evan Ingram is tight end 2. Mark Andrews, I believe, is the top 5 tight end as well. Both of these guys are among the league lead when it comes to target share, at least at the tight end position. Both of these guys are move tight ends. Mark Andrews is splitting time with Nick Boyle, with other tight ends on the roster. Evan Ingram is not brought out as much as he was last year. His snap share jumped from in the 60s last year to in the upper 70s this year. And I think that's something that is going to stay, though I don't necessarily know if he's going to come out and play this week because of a recent injury. That said, both of these guys are young. Both of these guys are getting the targets that you want at the tight end position. And this is even a scenario where, because you have both of these guys, I don't think that you need any additional depth here because you kind of have it already built in.
I agree with the last statement, but there is another trade piece here that you could potentially use to get help at RB. Like we said, Josh Oliver's coming back. Chris Herndon is back. If you could somehow trade for either a lesser piece at tight end to just get that second or that backup. I don't know if TJ Hawkinson is a good somebody to target. Gerald Everett right now is a top 12 tight end. But if you could find somebody who is willing to trade, let's say, and I mean, it's really dealer's choice at this point because both of these guys are top 4. Evan Ingram's being the tight end 1, Mark Andrews being the tight end 4. So dealer's choice who you want to trade. But if you would trade somebody, let's just, for instance, Mark Andrews for TJ Hawkinson and help at running back, or even just to get like another trade chip, whether that be with a pick, and then you can flip that for a better running back. I might be doing that as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you can always look at any situation with multiple starting pieces, multiple top 5 pieces, and look at it as a sell. Just for me, I think this is one of those things that kind of gives this roster some differentiation because it's going to be hard for other teams in your league to be able to put out a couple of tight ends. You can even mix and match your tight ends and your wide receiver on bye weeks. So I think this is a situation just because of their relative youth that you kind of keep the band together. If this were Ingram and Kelsey, then yes, I would probably be trading one or the other depending on what I wanted to do this year. But because it's Ingram Andrews, I just don't think that there's any rush to it. And I think that you can get a bigger return waiting on the end of this season if you really want to move one of those 2 guys. Also, you have a bunch of 2020 picks. You have a first, second, third in both 2020 and 2021. Those are the things that I'd primarily be looking to trade. I would probably be looking to fix this roster by splitting David Johnson in 2 and getting 2 pieces back. But if you didn't necessarily want to go that way, then what Stompy suggested with selling Michael Thomas, selling Chark, McLaurin, or A-Rob, I think would be something that would be useful as well. Either way, it's just one piece away that you're missing on this team, and I think that this is a really, really good automobile. This is I don't even know what to equate this to. This is, I don't know. This is a Hyundai Genesis. It's nice. It's unexpectedly nice. You know, it's one of those things that you didn't expect the level of luxury that you have in the car. You didn't expect it to be running as it has years down the line, but it's doing well. It's just one piece that you need to kind of get that over the top. And for me, that would be a third RB. What about you, Sam? What is your final diagnosis on this roster?
So I believe the first car that I ever bought on my own was a 4.8 liter Silverado, which is kind of the less powerful version of those trucks. They come in like 4.8, 5.3, and 6.2 or something like that. I bought I think it was a 4.86 cylinder. I'm not entirely sure. Point is that it's on the outside, it looks fantastic. It looks like a pickup. Let's just say you have all of the amenities. You have Sirius XM radio, you have seat warmers, what have you, everything involved in it. But your engine is not nearly as powerful as some of the better versions of the truck. And that's represents those running backs for me. While it's going to get the job done most of the time, you still need help there. So you need to add those other 2 cylinders. You need to add that 0.5 liter injection to get this team to the top. So trade some of those amenities to get a better engine in there. Like I said, I would be trading one of the top wide receivers or one of the top tight ends to get better at running back. And then I think you're in contention for back-to-back here.
Good team, good squad. Really enjoyed doing the diagnostic. Thank you for setting this in. That is going to be it for us today. Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to follow your head technicians, ETAN Mosia for myself on Twitter, FF Stompy for Sam. You can find me at Number Fire and Roto Underworld. Go ahead and follow what Sam is working on at FF Mercs. And please go to the Dynasty Diagnostic podcast feed, give us a 5-star rating and review. It really helps the podcast grow and reach more listeners. Thank you for making it to the Dynasty Diagnostic Service Center today. Please be sure to keep up with your scheduled maintenance and catch us next time to ensure quality performance. See you on your next visit.